Right, good to see everybody. So we're starting a new month, and there's, I'll have to see how many weeks we're in a month. I'm not sure. It might be 4 or 5.
I think it's 4. Yeah.
Maybe it's 4. I'm going to do a little bit on using gouache today, or watercolour in a sort of gouache style. So I've tried to pick an image that isn't too complicated, to be honest. This one of the trees. So this is partly something that I'd like to experiment a little bit more with myself. I do quite a lot of gouache type paintings in my sketchbooks. It's basically watercolour with a little bit of white mixed in. So this one, I've used a little bit of pastel as well, but this was a sketch for a commission I had quite a few years ago. So sometimes it's quite a nice, quick way of getting some colour and tone down and just working out ideas. Or you can work it up to a resolve painting in its own right. Most of mine are in sketchbooks on sort of toned paper. So basically like watercolour washes, then I add the gouache in with the lighter areas. This one I was quite careful in drawing out the structure of the building first. I think I did that with Southend Plein Air painters once, and then put the paint on. Others I will just go straight in with paint, like so this sort of thing. They were just very quick sketches at the seaside, in Thorpe Bay, just to just try some different ideas out. So it feels to me as a way of working a little bit quicker. So that's that. The ones I did as demos earlier in the week for the Tuesday group, I decided to do them on white paper. I generally use the colour paper, but I quite like to get used to using white kind of watercolour paper. So something like this, you could do a little bit of drawing if you wanted, or if it's a fairly simple composition, you might be able to draw directly with the brush. So that's part of the appeal of gouache. It's a medium that it's a little bit like poster paint or powder paint. When I was at school, we had like powder paint, and I started off with I got given some oil paints when I was very, very young, and then I heard about this stuff called gouache when I was about 12 or 13, and I got some of those, and I found that I really took to them. I found them a nice sort of intuitive way to paint. They're a bit more forgiving than watercolour because you can paint more opaquely. You can wash areas out and then overpaint with opaque paint. So for me, they're a bit more how I feel comfortable painting. And I also like to be able to draw with the paint rather than have to draw everything out first and then almost like fill it in with watercolour.
What did you call that paint again?
Gouache. Gouache. Have you heard of it?
No.
So what it is watercolour that's more opaque. It's basically opaque watercolour, so it's got a little bit, probably got some of the colours have got a bit of white in them. So they tend to look a bit flatter. It gets used a lot or it used to get used a lot in design. Designers used to use that a lot. But I was thinking like artists like Turner, if you look at some of Turner's watercolours, he used like a toned paper, and then he would use watercolour and then he'd use white with it in places. So the idea of like this sort of pure watercolour idea, which is quite fashionable within recent times, it's not how artists have always used watercolour. There's all sorts of ways. So it's basically the difference between this and acrylics is that once this dries, you could put water on it and wash areas out and rehydrate it. Whereas acrylics is plastic and that will dry and that will be it. That will be stuck down then. So the binder is gum arabic, same as watercolour. So it's like pigment and gum arabic. Yep.
So do you have to buy tubes of gouache?
You don't have to. You can do, but I've not done. I mean, years ago I did do.
Or do you just mix?
I just use my watercolours. Yeah.
Just thickly?
Yeah, just in a little bit thicker, and you could just buy like the white. That's all I've done. I bought the white gouache. You could buy white watercolour, but I find that the white watercolour isn't quite as strong. It's not quite as opaque. So I tend to just buy a white gouache, and then just add that to my others.
Yeah.
Years ago I did have the proper paints, but I've got so many watercolours, I don't really want to buy more paints because I know they won't get used.
But you can buy gouache.
You can buy gouache, yeah. Yeah, one of the students in the afternoon class bought a set, but they're not particularly cheap, you know, for a reasonable quality one. So if you've got watercolours already, I'll just use watercolours and add a bit of white to it. You could possibly add white acrylic. That's the white gouache. And I've got a new tube somewhere that I've just bought. I'm not sure what I've done with it.
Why did you add white to every colour?
You don't have to. Yeah. It makes them a bit flat. Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, some artists seem to do that, and they seem to paint quite flatly. But I think just go with your taste. I mean, I like transparent areas and I like some opaque areas. So I think just work, you know, try it and see what suits really. But for me, it's particularly working in the sketchbooks. It's a nice forgiving way of working. And sometimes, I mean, I do a lot of the pen drawings, which would be more like that. But when you've got big areas to cover, it takes a lot of messing about with pens, trying to sort of tone those areas in. So in some ways, it's a lot quicker to just pop a bit of paint down, really, for that. So for me, I see it as a way of working a bit quicker and more of a sketching sort of medium. But as I say, some people do paintings and show them as artwork. So something like this, I probably would start. I mean, I'll add a little bit of white to this, but really a blue. You know, you could just do a watercolour blue. That would be fine for the sky. Go a bit paler. I'll add a little bit of white to that and make that a little bit paler. But I don't think at this stage you could really tell the difference between a watercolour wash and the gouache. So that could be the sky. Then I would go with the palest yellowy greens. So again, I'm going to add a little bit of white to that, and maybe a tiny touch of green. So these areas here and here, pop those in, and probably down here as well. Actually, that could go. Got a bigger brush to pop that in with a bigger brush. Yeah, it's probably better more of a wash brush just to get that covered quicker. So it's very much how I'd use the, so far, how I'd use watercolours. And then darker green. So I've got basically tube paint here, and I'm adding the green and the brown so that the green isn't too strong. Just to get a nice, strong, darker tone. That's too dark, that's probably something in between. And I thought, like on Tuesday, I'll try just using my oil painting brushes rather than the watercolour brushes. So they're slightly stiffer brushes. And I did find it gives a slightly different look. Oh, I should clean these. Right, okay, so sort of work some of the foliage areas in. Go a bit bigger. So I'm trying to vary the green a little bit. I might go a little bit lighter here, so add a little bit more yellow to that. And I thought really it's a medium I might try outside a little bit more. In the winter time, I try quite a bit of acrylics outside, and they work fairly well. But I do find that they dry so quickly, whereas I think I might have a better chance of keeping this wet than I would with acrylics. Something like that, and then perhaps some darker tones here. I won't do everything, I'll just give you a kind of starter. Get some darks in here. Whoops, that's getting too wet. Like that. lighten that a little bit. So some areas that are quite solid, I'm painting quite solid, and then where we've got the canopy is opening out, I've put a few little marks just to suggest that. So that'll be that bit, and then for the tree trunks themselves, I'll make a darker mix. So I've got some blue and brown I use to get a nice dark tone. I could let that dry. I'll go wet, yeah, because that's fairly thick paint. That's not bleeding in too much.
Oh, so you did the leaves before you did the trunk?
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to do that. If I had more leaves, you know, further
Afterwards,
closer to,
yeah.
I'd then put those there. So I'll add a few more in closer to, just to show you how to do that. But I think with these sort of woodland scenes, I tend to do that. I tend to work from background to foreground. So whatever's back here, and then the next layer, and then gradually layer it forward. But these trees, to me, appear to be in front of the canopy behind. So
Oh, I see. The shrubs are behind the tree.
yeah, I think so. That lot there looks further back.
Yeah.
Some of these could be. There's a bit of mixture. Some are in the foreground and some are further back. So it could be that, you know, I'll maybe add a few more here now, sort of around here. So something like that, and then it could be that if I had, well, say I had some really bright leaves here, I'll mix a lighter, perhaps add a little bit of white to this mix, and you know, you could have some. And this is still wet, but it would dry quite quickly, a lot quicker than oils would. So if you had some sort of like leaves in the foreground, you could then pop those in there. And equally, if I had you know, little bits of sky showing through, I could make a thicker mix of bluey white, just a few little bits of sky holes here and there, that sort of thing. So painting the lights in rather than with watercolour preserving paint. So it's sort of like something in between watercolours and oil.
Gouache doesn't have any, it doesn't have the same base as acrylic.
No, it's the same basis as watercolour.
Watercolour mix.
Yeah. So it's very much like watercolours, but opaque watercolour. So it's not so transparent. It's mostly pigment and gum a bit, which is what watercolour is. That's what it sticks together. Just over here.